know and why you're here today is a privately owned waste incinerator on the border between Brampton and Mississauga is planning to quadruple its operations and become the largest waste burning facility in Canada. The expansion is going to load even more dangerous pollutants into our community, which is already burdened by heavy air pollution from industry and transportation. So, I really want to thank you all for spending some of your evening with us to have this very important conversation. Before we start, as we know, for thousands of years, Indigenous people inhabited and cared for the land and continue to do so today. As settlers on stolen land, it is our responsibility to be stewards in Peel region and thank those who took care of it before us. Here in Brampton specifically, we acknowledge the territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Chippewa peoples, the land that is home to the Métis, and most recently the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, who are descendants of the Mississaugas of the Credit. So I'll chat a little bit about myself, introduce my positionality. So my parents came to Brampton from Guyana back in the 80s. And so I was born here, grew up in Brampton, and I'm an avid environmental advocate. I am one of the top 30 under 30 at York University as a change maker, notably for co-founding the Community Climate Council, which is the first, shout out to one of my co-founders, Divya, which is the first climate organization in Brampton that focuses on both advocacy and policy, and is primarily BIPOC and youth-led. So, with that said, I have some incredible speakers here that I want to introduce you all as well. Oh, and of course, most importantly, I've grown up in Brampton, which is a huge part of the positionality I wanted to share as well. So Karen over here, she is very passionate about helping to get plastics out of the environment. Karen has worked as a journalist, as a labor and community organizer for many years. And at Environmental Defense Canada, she spearheads very ambitious work to fight against plastics and foster a safe environment for families to thrive. So we're going to dive in to hear what Karen has to say, and then I will introduce you to Emily, who's right beside her. Go for it.
Sorry, I was just going to say, we've been working for a year or so trying to stop the expansion of the Brampton waste incinerator owned by Emerald. I work to stop plastics, as Miranda mentioned, and really plastics are a big part of what gets burned or in waste incinerators or buried in landfills. So there you go. So the Emerald Waste Incinerator, in case you didn't know it was there, I'm hearing from a lot of people who weren't clear that there was a big incinerator in Brampton. There has been an incinerator, that's what it looks like. Miranda and I drove by there about 2 or 3 years ago now. I took that photo on a cloudy day. It's at 7656 Bramley Road, just straight south of the Bramley GO station. It's currently permitted to burn 182,000 tons of waste, mixed waste per year. And the company is proposing to redevelop the incinerator and expand it to 900,000 tons, which would be the equivalent of about 1/3 of all Ontario's household waste generated every year. So this is why we're saying, like, this growing this incinerator this big would make Brampton a bit of a magnet for waste from all around the province. Emerald has identified bad air pollution in the area. Emerald basically, to get its permit, was required to set up or to publish some reports, environmental screening reports with a lot of information about current emissions from the smoke and chemicals and pollution that come out of the stack, and future modeling based on a 900,000 ton per year capacity. And I'm just going to highlight, it's kind of boring to talk about chemicals, but they're really important because it's really the death we can't see. 2 pollutants stood out in what is already in the background air pollution in Brampton. Benzylapyrene, which is a known carcinogen, is already present in the air around the incinerator at 125%, so 1.25 times what it should be. in the air in Brampton according to the provincial guidelines. So there's already too much of this stuff in the air in Brampton today without any incinerator expansion. And hydrochloric acid, which contributes to smog, is even worse, 375 times, so nearly 4 times what it should be, that's in the air. And that comes from things like industry and traffic. And it's also coming out of that incinerator stack. Emerald projects that if it gets its expansion to 900,000 tons, the amount of nitrogen dioxide, which is a very dangerous air pollutant that affects lung health, causes asthma, and other respiratory diseases, it would be nearly 1.3 times or 128% of the federal air quality guidelines, which admittedly are a bit stronger than the provincial ones. But we thought we'd note that here. And also really troubling is that the dioxins and furans would be 107% of what they should, of the air quality guidelines. And those dioxins and furans are terrible things. They're carcinogenic chemicals. Those are produced explicitly from burning waste, including plastics. So it's not like your garbage has dioxins and furans in it, we hope. But once it goes through a waste incinerator, once you burn the stuff, especially at lower temperatures, the dioxins and furans form. And those are what are called persistent pollutants, meaning they don't really go away. They build up in soil, they build up in plants and animals, in our food, and they get stored in our fat cells and they cause cancer. So those are really dangerous chemicals that are really a product of waste incineration. There's already too much of them in the air today, but if this incinerator gets to be expanded, it'll be more than the guidelines, provincial guidelines. This is according to the company's own estimates. What we hear is people think, and this is really what the industry, this is a big industry with a lot of money behind it because they can make a lot of money from garbage. And what they like to say is that you can produce green energy from waste, and it's great. We have all this waste, we have all this material, we can burn it and produce green energy. But actually it's false. I mean, first of all, it's heavily polluting to the local community. So who gets stuck with it is the communities that can't fight it effectively. We can show the next slide. But also, is this really a good source of green energy? No. There's some research, very recent research in the last year out of the United States looking at emissions information from the Environmental Protection Agency there shows that waste is the most greenhouse gas intense. So this is not even all the other pollutants I was talking about. This is just straight climate warming, the stuff that's creating all the storms and the floods and probably the droughts and the extreme heat. Those greenhouse gas emissions are highest from waste, both from the kind of emissions that are produced from things like fossil fuels and then also from other organics. If you add them all together, it's an enormous amount of emissions to produce the same amount of waste per kilowatt hour as, or much more than even coal, biomass, oil, and gas. And just to note that in Ontario, we actually have a pretty clean grid. So our grid's even, I mean, our electricity production is even cleaner than that because there's so much hydroelectricity that doesn't produce much of these emissions, right? So waste is going in burning waste for energy is going in the absolute wrong direction. But if we want to have clean energy, we need to really look at renewables, air, sort of wind and solar, right? Not burning our garbage. So just to repeat, yeah, you can advance it. Just to repeat where we are, the provincial environment minister has the final say on whether the company will get its permit. We're waiting for the company to release an updated environmental screening report, which will be available for public comment for 60 days again. Community members can write to the minister once that report is out and ask for a full environmental assessment. You can also use our tool on our website to do that. As soon as that report is out, we'll provide we'll provide a summary of any updated information and the opportunity to write the minister. But I encourage you to send personal letters, and we've put the addresses together at the end to your own MPP and to the minister saying you absolutely do not want to see this expansion in Brampton, that you're concerned about the impacts of it. and that you'd like to see a full environmental assessment. And the other thing is that if we get the environmental assessment, there'll be an opportunity for public input. There's an independent scientific assessment, hopefully, and all the documents become public and available for viewing. So it's an important process. We'll be able to look at the alternatives to incineration as well, including what Emily's going to talk about, which is waste reduction. So yeah, just to wrap up, we don't want to make Brampton into Ontario's waste dump. Other towns are already being urged to send their waste to the new facility. The town of Simcoe passed a resolution to sign a long-term contract to send, or the county of Simcoe, I guess it's a county, to send its household waste to Brampton for like the next 25 years. Other municipalities, and I think Emily will talk about it, other municipalities are obviously also going to be lobbied to send their waste here. It's not fair for the rest of Ontario to burn its waste in your backyard, for sure. You all don't believe, you don't deserve to breathe even more toxic pollution. I'll pass it over, well, back to Miranda to introduce someone.
Thanks so much, Karen. That was great. I absolutely love what you're saying about Brampton does not deserve this. That resonated so strongly with me. So I also work at Environmental Defense, and despite living in Brampton, I did not know about the issue at all. And it's really important to look at this through a social justice lens and question why is Brampton the city that's chosen to be the dumping ground of these pollutants. Okay, without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to Emily. Emily is the senior campaigner at the Toronto Environmental Alliance, a nonprofit environmental organization. Emily has spent almost 15 years advocating for zero waste and a greener, more equitable city. Emily works with residents, businesses, and researchers to identify and champion waste policies and programs to help communities eliminate waste, prevent pollution, and shift to a zero waste circular economy. So please welcome Emily.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm so glad to see so many people coming out tonight because, as Karen said, this is a really important issue. So my name's Emily. I'm from Toronto. And I'm here because in Toronto, we have been fighting against incineration also for 35 years. T has been fighting against incinerators. We don't want our garbage to be burned in Toronto, and we definitely don't want it to be burned in our neighbors' yards either. It's not fair. The city of Toronto is actually talking right now about whether to send garbage to the Emerald incinerator, and we are going to be fighting against that. So, I have to be here to say, we're with you and we want to stop this. We don't think anyone should be burning garbage. So a little bit of what I'll be talking about today is what else can we do? Because something that we hear a lot from incinerator proponents and incinerator companies is, well, what else are you going to do with your garbage? It's got to go to landfill, or it's got to go to an incinerator. There's no other choice. And after studying waste for a number of years and literally digging into garbage bags in high-rise buildings around Toronto and looking at policies from different places, I know that there is a better way. So I want to equip you all with some of that information about what's actually going into this incinerator and where it should be going instead. Try this. All right, thanks. So first of all, I say the term zero waste, and really we're just talking about the 3 R's, if you guys have heard about them: reduce, reuse, and recycle. We need to reduce as much as possible, reuse as long as possible, and recycle the rest. And if you can't reduce, reuse, or recycle it, you shouldn't be allowed to make it. We just need to design it out of the system. And unfortunately right now we have a lot of a waste system that's so focused on recycling, but that's not really a long-term environmental solution. So another concept I want to mention is a linear economy versus a circular economy. So right now we have a wasteful, one-way, throw-away linear economy. So we have resources that are extracted from the earth, trees cut down, oil and gas pulled out of the ground to make plastics, and minerals that are mined to make metals. We turn that into a product, bring it home, use it for a few minutes, maybe a few years, and then we have to send it somewhere away. That's really a wasteful system. It's hard on the environment upstream, where we actually have more of the environmental impact, and it also means we're stuck with these piles of garbage. We want to move to a circular economy where things last longer. You don't have appliances that break in a year. You can reuse and repair things. use. And when you recycle it, it actually gets recycled into new things. And the goal of that is to eliminate not only the need for landfills and incinerators, but also keep resources circulating so we don't have to cut down the forest to make a new piece of paper. We can just recycle that paper instead of burning. So this is the sort of the future we want. And it sounds really lofty and ambitious, but I'm confident we can get there. And that's because we've dug into the garbage. And this is consistent with audits. I don't know if you can see all the colors in the text back there, but this is consistent with waste audits around Canada, across Toronto, Peel region, and it's also similar to what we're seeing in the garbage that Emerald says they burn in their facility. Most of what's in our garbage is non-garbage. That's the big headline. I think 45% of what's going into the Emerald facility is organics, food waste, yard waste, things that should be composted, not burned. That's the same in most household garbage and commercial garbage. Then we have things like paper, plastic, glass, and metal. Those things should be recycled. They shouldn't be burned. That's where they should be going. We have building materials, textiles, and then other, which includes hazardous waste, electronic waste, and bulky appliances. Most of this stuff doesn't belong in the garbage. There's a very small fraction that we call garbage just because we don't have somewhere else to put it. Another thing I want to say is, looking at this, so you might think, well, everybody's not doing their job sorting. People are lazy. Well, I also want to tell you about some other facts that a lot of us don't know. Most of Ontario's garbage actually comes from the industrial, commercial, and institutional sector. So that's non-residential waste. That's shopping malls, office buildings, restaurants, factories, places that make food, hospitals. 2/3 of Ontario's waste is actually from that sector, and they have a terrible recycling rate. They only recycle 10 to 13% of their waste. And that's because they don't have any regulations that require them to recycle or compost their waste. So you can have a factory that makes food and they can throw it all in the landfill at the end of the day, and there's no law stopping them from doing it. Meanwhile, we have the residential recycling rate across Ontario is about 50%. So we could do a lot better, because we still have a lot of divertible stuff in our garbage, but we're doing much better than the industrial, commercial, and institutional sector, and they're the ones that are making most of the problem. So the reason I wanted to talk about that is that really leads us to what some of the solutions are. We have too much food and organic waste and compostable stuff that's going into our garbage and being burned at that incinerator. We should be banning that from landfill and incinerator, and we should be requiring all businesses to collect their organics. These are policies that exist in other municipalities across Canada. A growing number of US states have a law you cannot put organics into landfill or into an incinerator, and so suddenly there's really affordable compost services across that state. There's all these great new programs that these major grocery chains and manufacturers, they know how to get their food waste to a composter because they have to do it. So municipalities across Ontario have been asking for this. The Ontario government has sort of slowed down on that progress. Another thing, plastics and recyclables. So we have a 20 to 30% of what's in the average garbage bag from anywhere in Canada is plastic materials, paper, metal, glass that should be recycled. But right now in Ontario, businesses are not part of the same recycling program. They don't have to recycle the same stuff, they don't have access to recycle the same packaging. So you drink a can of Coke at the shopping mall, that does not have the same recycling system that the can of Coke that you drink at home. The same can, you're the same person, but for some reason the rules don't apply. So we need those requirements passed for all businesses in Ontario as well. And I mentioned a can of Coke, what we really need is a deposit. Ontario is one of the only provinces that doesn't have a deposit on drink containers, and we have the worst drink container recycling rate. It's not a coincidence. So these are really simple policies that aren't about putting the blame on individuals to learn all the rules. It's like, these are bigger system things, and we can change them. Sorry, I keep pulling the microphone away, I think. And then two more examples I just want to mention is textiles and carpet. Carpets and textiles, if we get those out of the landfill, that'll be almost 200,000 tons per year just to recycle carpets and textiles, clothing, leather, things like that. And electronic waste. Ontario has some of the worst electronic waste regulations. It's getting a little, is it giving me feedback? Sorry. Electronics in BC and in Quebec, anything that you can plug into the wall or anything that has batteries gets recycled. In Ontario, it's only computers and cell phones and printers. So we have these piles of appliances and things that are going into the garbage. getting burned in an incinerator, and all those toxic things that are in the batteries and all those heavy metals that are precious metals that we should be recycling, mercury, they're just getting burned. So this is what we can do across the province. And I also just want to mention, at home, I know that we can do better as well. So we can do better education and outreach to help people understand these complicated recycling and waste sorting rules. We need to make sure that everybody has access to organics and good places to sort their waste. And I think apartments and condos, a lot of them were, for example, built with just a single garbage chute at the end of the hall. Makes it really easy to send out the garbage, but really hard to do the right thing. And I had a project for 5 years working with different multi-residential buildings across Toronto with a researcher. And our first group of buildings cut their waste by 25% just by looking around at what they could change in their building, doing more education. So that was just our group working with 5 or 6 buildings, and they cut their waste. So we know that with more deliberate methods, we could do a lot. So to conclude, as Karen was saying, incineration is not part of a circular economy. It is the most toxic, inefficient, and expensive way to deal with garbage. It also needs a constant flow of resources. This is another thing that I just have to say. If this incinerator gets its expansion permit, it will be 900,000 tons of garbage going in there every year for 20, 30, maybe more years. So if everyone in Brampton becomes the perfect zero waste angel, no garbage at all, everyone in Ontario is sorting their waste perfectly, there's no more organics going to landfill, we're all recycling everything, that incinerator still needs 900,000 tons of waste per year. So they're just going to import it from somewhere else. It's not a waste facility for you, it's a for-profit company that wants to burn garbage. So we have to think about that, and is that really fair? So, thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a really powerful ending statement, and it's really difficult to fathom that amount. I'm going to step away from the speaker a bit. Something that really resonated that you said in general is I really appreciate that you didn't put pressure on people, and we are seeing that there's so much policy change that needs to happen. I'm sure most people in this room are doing an incredible job reducing, reusing, and recycling. So it's really eye-opening to see that a can of Coke isn't treated the same way in our house versus in an industry. So very eye-opening. Thank you for sharing all of that. Now we're going to transition into a panel discussion. So, hello? Okay. I'm really excited to hear from all of our panelists today. I'm going to go around and do a quick intro. So first here to my left, I have Amisha. And Amisha has been a proud Bramptonian for over 5 years, a local Brampton business owner for over 6 years. And she moved from Toronto to start her own meal delivery and catering business, focusing on healthy food, using locally sourced ingredients, and having worked in Canada's top 5 banks for over 15 years. Amisha also sits on the board of the Brampton Environmental Alliance and is here today as a concerned mother, a Brampton resident, and a Brampton business owner. Thank you, Amisha. Next to her, we have Steve Kirby. Steve is a member of the Sierra Peel Executive Committee, a chemist and business owner providing support and services to analytical testing laboratories for 35 years. Thank you, Steve. And last but not least, we have Divya Aurora. Divya is one of the co-founders of the Community Climate Council and a community organizer. She's passionate about advancing systems change in environmental and social justice movements, and focuses her work on the intersections between climate change, equity, and human and planetary health to drive transformative and sustainable outcomes. Let's take a minute to just welcome all our panelists. I know it's a small room, but a round of applause is nice to welcome people in. So to get started, the first question I wanted to ask is, what have you been hearing from your group's members or your neighbors or family members about the incineration issue? Is there anyone who would like to go first? We don't have to go in any particular order. Yeah, Steve.
We're concerned in a lot of areas. The first thing is when somebody says something's been there 30 years, it doesn't mean that they haven't been doing it for 30 years. I'm not saying they have, but we don't know. And we see this all over Canada where companies start up, they run, they change ownerships 3-4 times, and then they leave a mess. So one of the things that we're concerned with is what has this company done, and do they make their information available? The other thing that is also very important is as they expand, they're going to be burning an awful lot of garbage. When you talk about 900,000 tons, that's an awful lot. So when I say stuff like that to them, they just look at me like I'm from Mars, and they say, well, why would they do this in a highly populated area like Brampton? It makes absolutely no sense. When you had cornfields there 35 years ago, maybe it did. But today, when Brampton's intensifying, you have the 2040 vision where they're going to be building hubs for residential. It does not make sense to have an incinerator there at all, let alone one that's that big. So I think that from a scientist's point of view, we think it's kind of silly.
Thank you so much. Feel free to pass it.
Yeah, I mean, from community residents, we as community common council haven't really heard much, which is way more concerning, and that's not because people don't care, it's because people don't know. And so we've gone out into the community hoping to have conversations, but those conversations have been educational rather than discussions, because we'll ask people, did you even know about this in the first place? And mostly the response will be no, and how can I learn more about this? What can I do? And that's been a similar theme even within our group. Some people have known about it earlier, some members of our group are newer and just becoming keen of the issue, and so we as a group have been having internal dialogue and kind of educating ourselves, and so also talking about what we can do to take action. And so we've done two things to sort of try to do our part in the awareness of this, and one of them is we've launched a digital campaign, and so we try to create online infographics to reach young people, but also to make it easier to share with family, friends, our networks. Just quick summary of like what the issue is, what people can do about it, and the harms from our perspective. And then the second thing, we had a meeting with Mississauga, and we asked her what she's hearing from her constituents, because we thought that would be a good way to collect intel from, you know, politicians who should be ideally in touch with their constituents' concerns. And she was equally as surprised as us that her constituents are not aware about this, and so we want to have more of those meetings, and we want to urge everyone here to have more of those meetings with their MPPs, and, you know, ask them the question of what are you hearing about this from your constituents, and if you're not hearing anything, what are you doing about it? So yeah, I think those two things for us.
If I may, I want to read out an email that was sent by a resident in the Brampton area that is directly within the boundary of where Emerald is located. And this is written by Kristen Johnston, my bad. And she says, she wrote a letter to the mayor and councillors. Dear Mayor Brown, Councillor Power, and Councillor Fortini, I'm writing to express my deep concern regarding the proposed expansion of the Emerald Energy waste incineration plant in our neighborhood. As a resident of the Southgate community in Ramley and as a mother of infants, I am profoundly troubled by the potential impact this expansion could have on our community's health and environment. Emerald Energy is currently authorized to burn 150,000 tons of waste annually. However, they are now seeking to increase their capacity to 900,000 tons. This significant escalation raises serious health and environmental concerns. The burning of waste generates toxic pollutants such as dioxins and furans. These substances are not only harmful, but also persist in the environment, accumulating in soil and within our bodies. The adverse health effects, particularly young children and infants who are more vulnerable to pollution, cannot be understated. As a concerned mother, I urge you to consider the potential health risks and environmental impact of this proposed expansion. I kindly request that you advocate for us, Brampton residents, at a provincial level and say enough is enough. Please help us implore the government that change needs to be made to ensure the health and wellness of your city. Your citizens are very concerned and frankly scared. Please address these concerns, as it would be greatly appreciated by myself and other residents in our community who share these worries. Thank you for your attention to this urgent matter. I look forward to your response and hope for positive action to ensure a safer and healthier environment for all. Sincerely, Kristen Johnston, proud member of Brampton. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So for our next question, we're going to address some claims that the industry and the incinerator has shared, saying that there is no better alternative to managing our waste other than using an incinerator. So what do you all have to say to that? Who'd like to go first?
Yeah, I feel like this is a statement we've heard time and time again, just said differently, that we cannot do better when really they haven't tried to do better. And we know the science has told us that we need to find ways to do better, and so I don't think the incinerator, the company, and this is not just about them, but I don't think they have the right to say we can't do better unless you've tried other alternatives to make them work. And if they have failed, then maybe you can say we can't do better, but yeah, the whole incinerator expansion feels very much like a Band-Aid solution. You know, we've seen this happen in other areas of our society where, like Steve was saying, a company can come in and they'll say, you know, this is the best we can do, and they'll try to do it, and then it will often lead to more problems, and then they can just walk away free of any accountability, free of any responsibility, and it's usually the community members who don't have the resources to advocate for themselves that are stuck with the effects of the expansion of the project, whatever it may be. And so the statement, we cannot do better, just simply is not good enough, especially in the time we live in. We know that we need to have a drastically different way of living if we're able to avoid the devastating impact of climate change. And our community's already been seeing that. You know, we've seen the floods, we're all living it. And so, yeah, I think we know the negative impact it has, and there may be some positives to it, but looking at the bigger scheme of things, we can't do better just is not a good enough answer. And I think for most people that's true here, and we need more people to be aware of that and to raise that to the company, and also to municipal leaders who really, it's them, like the responsibility should sit with them and not with the people here to lead us to a more sustainable way of living.
If I may talk about my experiences as a resident, but also as a business owner, I think, and I strongly believe, I don't think it, I strongly believe it, and I have proven it time and again through my business and through my own actions, that we have the power. Each and every single one of us has the power. With my business, what I've done is, so there is a better way, there is a circular economy, like Emily has mentioned, and my business is living proof of that. Our containers, the food that we sell, the food that we sell, is locally sourced. It comes from Ontario farmers. We actually have Foodland Ontario's permission to use their logo to showcase the fact that we use Ontario produce. Number one. Number two, the kinds of containers that we use are 100% recycled material. They're not just recyclable, but they are actually manufactured from plastic bottles that you might throw out that get recycled, hopefully. But the companies that we source the containers from are actually, they use plastic water bottles, they melt the plastic, they shape them into new containers, and those are the containers that we use. And there is very specific messaging on all the containers that I put myself, and I say please recycle, just in case people think that they should be throwing it in the garbage. That is number two. Number three, again talking about a circular economy. The other kinds of containers that we use are produced in Aurora, Ontario. It is a program run by a women-led company based out of Guelph, and it is reusable containers. So takeout containers that are actually reusable, we charge a small deposit, just like how you have beer bottles and you have a deposit for it. We use those containers, we charge a small deposit, you enjoy your food. The containers are freezer friendly, they're microwave safe, and you just return it to a collection bin. The company picks it up, they wash, they sanitize, and they put it back into circulation in the system. So I don't see a greater example of a circular economy than that. In terms of recycling, and I think I'm probably jumping way ahead, but I just want to say this because Emily's presentation is very fresh in my mind right now. in terms of a linear versus a circular economy, we receive different kinds of materials. So the food comes in cardboard boxes. Heart Lake Recycling Center is very close by to where my business is located. We actually physically take the recyclable materials and we drop it off at Heart Lake Recycling Center. Anything that is compostable, we actually have compost bags. And I personally take compost home, unfortunately, because otherwise my business would have to pay double the amount of money if I were to put a compost bin in the back of my business. So it is not easy, like how Karen and Emily have mentioned. It is not easy for me as a business to sustain all these additional expenses. And so my question to any of the politicians out there who are now looking for our votes, yes, I have to say that. They are looking for our votes. So the question becomes is, I am a voter. I make it a point every single election, doesn't matter what level of government it is, I make it a point to go and vote, and that is how I believe my voice is heard. So I urge all of you to please go out and vote, but before that, whenever the election happens, before that, ask the business that you support, what are they doing to make a difference, to reduce the amount of garbage that they produce. Amazon is a classic example. I think Amazon and Walmart, I believe, also. If those giants can move towards less packaging, if they can move towards cardboard boxes instead of those plastic sheets, which they say is recyclable. I put it in the recycle bin. I don't know what you guys do, but I put it in the recycle bin. But if they can move, and Amazon is a giant, and it's Prime Day, today is the last day for Prime Day, in case anyone is looking to
No, we're not looking to support Prime Day. No, we're not.
the bottom line is the air that we breathe, can we control it? Maybe. I think we can. Can we change the direction of the wind? Definitely not. Just ask Florida. But what can we do day in and day out? So I can make a difference. I can make a difference with my kids, with guiding them where to throw what, how to sort out their waste that is produced. And then again, as a business owner, please come and ask me, what are you as a business owner doing to reduce waste? And I can tell you all the things that I'm doing. Go and ask other businesses as well. So yes, there is a lot of things, and like I said, I probably jumped a few questions ahead, but I just wanted to put it out there that we do have the power. It is in what we question, how we question it, and what steps we take. Thank you.
And so Brian, what are your thoughts on the incinerator, the industry saying that there's no better alternative?
Well, that's a very biased view, I would say. They're actually generating revenue from this. They hire consultants that write their screening reports. Their agenda is clear, is to make it as environmentally friendly as they can in their reports. But the reality is that it's really not. Anytime you're burning anything, anybody that's had a fire, start a fire and they look and see what you see, right? You get smoke, you get steam, you get toxic compounds. This is just known facts. So I think that they can put as many scrubbers as they want on it, which is what they do. They say, oh, we'll remove everything, don't worry, because we're the public. But the reality is it doesn't remove all. And the other thing that's concerning too is that the level of testing they do is very, very low. They're doing annual testing for some of these compounds, and they know when that audit's going to happen, so they know when you're coming. So when they know you're coming, being in an industry where I see audits all the time, guess what? You wear your cleanest, whitest lab coat. You put your hair in a bun. You wear your best suit. You have your war room to deal with questions. You're completely prepared because you know it's not really representative of what's going on. And I think the time delay too for a lot of these analyses are very long. People don't realize that. Doing a dioxin analysis, it's not an online analysis. You don't know. You know 6 weeks later, and it's too late, right? And they test. They know when the testing's happening. So obviously, they can compare as they see fit. And I think that's our concern. And we raise that in the report that we sent. We want them to do more testing, and I think that's a a very fair thing to ask a business that's going to do it. Is make sure you're testing enough that the people, Joe public, is comfortable. So that's what it is.
Karen, before I go to the next question, talking about how Emerald, the facility, is claiming to use their excess energy and convert it into green energy, could you maybe give a little bit of context on what that means, how they're claiming they're going to do it before we go into answering questions?
Sure, I mean, this is a claim that incinerator companies make around the world, is that, oh, well, we're turning the energy that we're generating from the burning into electricity. It typically, I think, from what I understand from hearing from other incinerator operators, is that really the turning into electricity is a very expensive, difficult proposition that from a waste incinerator that is really more about getting regulatory breaks for saying that you're a waste energy facility and actually it's then about generating electricity. And what we also have heard now from Emerald is that they're going to somehow produce hydrogen, which is an energy or a fuel source from the incinerator. And I can never remember the name, but what's the wacky machine guy? Yeah, it's like a Rube Goldberg machine, which is, does anyone know what that means? Like, I had not heard that. But Rube Goldberg invents all these weird machines that you don't really need because it's just a lot of extra tubes and bells and whistles to do something that you could basically just do by blowing air out of your mouth, right? So that it's sort of that excuse, which is, oh, we're going to produce hydrogen, which is like a buzzword for clean energy. But really, they're just going to burn garbage and use some of the electricity that they can generate through the steam, I guess, in a turbine, to then take hydrogen out of water. Like, we could do that with a windmill, and we probably should be doing that with a windmill, not with burning our garbage, right? So all of it is, it's typically tarted up to make burning garbage look better than it is. And I think I showed that slide earlier, and I have it here. Just to remind people, like, this is not all the other pollutants, this is just greenhouse gas emissions, and you can see this is based on US data, which would be very similar to Canadian data. How much greenhouse gas emissions per unit of energy of electricity generated, waste is the most. So if we want to have clean energy, it's not going to be from waste. It's going to be from the solutions we know already: wind, solar power, water power. Just to add to that, the reason you get any energy from burning garbage is because there's plastic in there, and plastic is made from fossil fuels. It's made from gas and oil. So it's just like a really dirty version of burning gas and oil, which is already really dirty. So you just made it more dirty and more toxic. Imagine, I remember this one waste guy would always say, like, imagine you threw last night's dinner on a fire. It's not gonna burn. It's gonna put the fire out. You just think of like a messy plate of spaghetti on top of it. It's not gonna burn. It takes a lot of energy to burn that. So you need paper, wood, textiles and carpets, and plastic in order to create that heat. So I know incineration companies do look at the amount of plastic in the waste stream. And I think most of us would agree, we've all heard a lot, I hope, about the problems with plastics. Plastics break down, they leach chemicals into our environment, into our bodies. We want to eliminate plastics and move away from them. We don't want to have unrecyclable plastics in the waste stream. We just want to say, oh, you can't recycle it, stop making it. Then where are they going to get their energy from? So yeah, it's definitely not green energy. It's scary.
So just my comment on that is these incinerators are essentially like burning tires.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for the analogy. It really is burning oil, even though it's called clean, and that doesn't sound quite clean to me.
That's not going to gain energy efficiency as required.
Exactly, it is very energy inducive to do that. I would want to pass it over to the panelists now quickly, just to hear your thoughts on what do you think about these claims? What do you think about the industry saying that they will create green energy like hydrogen? Who would like to take that one first?
So hydrogen, okay. Well, I mean, when you look at the marketing, it is quite attractive, right? They're going to generate hydrogen. I'm not sure of all of the science behind it marketing perspective, it does look excellent. Well, this is great, right? We're getting garbage, we're getting hydrogen, we're getting energy, but the devil's always in the details and anything like this, and I think that that's a little bit of the concern is. So again, as a chemist, it's primarily for me the toxins, right? As a well.
And there's one thing I forgot to mention, which is to keep these turbines going, they need a constant stream of heat and steam, right? And when they don't have the right garbage mix together, they add natural gas. And so really, it's like a natural gas. I mean, we already, in Brampton, there already is a natural gas electricity generator. And it's already a big polluter. So basically what you're doing is you're saying, well, we'll have this smaller additional natural gas electricity producer that also produces garbage. And maybe we'll get some hydrogen out of it too. It's just a very complicated, convoluted thing that is really about trying to tie this, garbage sandwich into an ice cream bowl. That's really what's happening, I think, with these things.
Really, we do have to end it here, but it is important to note that this is just the beginning of our conversation. This is just the beginning of change, and this is just the beginning of hope. You've all given me so much hope for being here, so thank you so much for spending your evening with us. Have a good rest of your night.